What's up guys, I'm Dave Klein, aka Dave Control, and here is everything you need to know about Elden Ring going into it. First though, there might be some minor spoilers here and there from trailers, interviews, and the network test. So if you want to go in completely fresh, I respect that, and feel free to keep tuned to GameSpot for other Elden Ring content. I'm going to be focusing on gameplay in this particular video, as I don't want anyone to have to worry about lore or story spoilers here. Elden Ring is the latest game from FromSoftware, creators of Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and of course, King's Field. The game takes the basic action RPG mechanics of Dark Souls, but introduces a brand new open world that completely changes things up. Similar to the Soulsborne games, as of the closed beta, players will be able to choose from a number of starting classes, with stats they'll be able to upgrade as they level up, allowing for a level of freedom in creating your own builds. The starting classes thus far are Vagabond, Warrior, Hero, Bandit, Astrologer, Prophet, Samurai, Prisoner, Confessor, and Wretch, with Wretch being the level 1 build. Stats you can choose to upgrade with each level are Vigor, Mind, Endurance, Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. This means, similar to prior Soulsborne games, you'll have the freedom to choose between Strength, Quality, Dex, and varying magic builds, or any merger of those. Leveling up is only possible after meeting your first Finger Maiden, Melina. Once you've met her, you'll be able to level up at any of the game's Sites of Grace, which act similar to bonfires from the Souls games. At the Sites of Grace, you'll be able to manage your Estus Flasks, and like Dark Souls 3, you'll have a variety of Estus Flask types. You'll have ones that refill your HP, ones that refill your FP, or focus points that allow you to cast magic, and a brand new Flask of Wondrous Physique, which is a customizable Estus Flask that will give you varying attributes depending on what crystal tiers you equip to it. You'll also be able to upgrade how many Estus Flask uses you get by using special golden seeds. If you recall from the game's trailer, there are giant golden Erd trees throughout the game that are clearly significant. There are also smaller, lesser Erd trees you can find throughout the game's map. At these lesser Erd trees, you'll find special golden seeds, which are exactly what you need to upgrade your Estus Flask uses. The number of seeds you need will change as you upgrade your flask, and this isn't the only way to obtain these seeds. Additionally, you can upgrade the recovery strength of your Estus Flasks. Back to Sites of Grace though, as the game is now open world, these act like bonfires from Dark Souls 2 or 3, in that you can immediately warp to them once you've activated them. Unlike those games, so long as you're not in battle, you can warp to any Site of Grace at pretty much any point in time. The map and world of Elden Ring is absolutely massive, so these are meant to not only be a spot of respite, but an important way to quickly travel around the map. However, that means the map could quickly become overrun with a ridiculous number of Sites of Grace every time you enter a legacy dungeon or smaller dungeon. In order to account for this, you'll find several Stakes of Marika throughout the game. Think of these like mini checkpoints. You can't rest at them like a Site of Grace, nor can you manage some of your special equipment here. However, if you die, you can choose to return to life at either a nearby Stake of Marika or Site of Grace. This allows FromSoftware to place Stakes of Marika in ways where you won't have to tediously backtrack from various Sites of Grace if you die, and they also won't need to overpopulate the map with too many warpable Sites of Grace. And speaking of death, the game works just like previous Soulsborne games in how it's handled. There are no save points in Elden Ring, and the game is consistently auto-saving. Upon death, instead of needing to load a prior save, you'll lose all of your currency and respawn at your nearest checkpoint. You'll have a chance to regain this lost currency, but should you die again, that currency is permanently lost. In Elden Ring, this currency is referred to as runes. Runes are what you'll be using to not only purchase items and weapons in the game, but are also your experience points you'll be using to level up. On top of purchasing weapons, you can use your runes to upgrade your weapons and make them more powerful. This mechanic is just like previous games. You'll find various blacksmiths around the lands between who can upgrade your weapons with a number of runes and certain rare upgrade materials. Weapon upgrades not only raise their basic attack power, but can also affect their attribute scaling. You can find these on every weapon under the attribute scaling section of the menu. If there's a letter next to a stat, like a D next to strength, it means that your weapon has extra bonus damage based on how good the letter is and how high your strength stat is. Again, like prior FromSoftware games, various weapons will require certain attributes in order to be able to use them in the first place. So that means the best weapon for you will very much depend on what build you're using. Equip load is also back, which means the heavier the armor and weapons you're using, the slower your character will move and the less invincibility frames they'll have when attempting to dodge away from enemies. New to Elden Ring is crafting. Around the lands between, you'll find various crafting materials out in the wilderness, and even from slaying various creatures you'll find roaming about. The items you can craft range from being able to cure status ailments like poison, to pots or knives you can throw at enemies, or even to crafting special arrows to use with a bow. To aid with crafting, you'll also be able to find and or purchase various cookbooks, which will teach the player how to craft more advanced items. Something I've brought up multiple times at this point is the world map, which is new to Elden Ring. As the game is open world and the map is so much more massive than previous Souls games, FromSoftware has added a map with the ability to fast travel to certain points. However, if you're not the biggest fan of this edition, you don't have to worry too much as the map is very basic. While it does show the wider world, you can use it to find some points of interest, and NPCs may even mark points of interest on the map, the game's smaller dungeons strewn throughout the world and legacy dungeons have no maps associated with them. So you'll still have to figure out how to navigate through those mazes on your own without the aid of this tool. Additionally, you don't start off with a map, but rather will have to find map fragments in order to slowly fill it in yourself. And speaking of dungeons, FromSoftware has completely changed how they've approached the overall map design to Elden Ring in order to create something open world. Once you enter the game's first area in Limgrave, the map will immediately open up to you, so you won't have an extremely guided experience and interwoven map like we've seen in games like Bloodborne or Dark Souls 1. However, within the lands between, you'll discover both hidden dungeons and legacy dungeons. The hidden dungeons act like mini dungeons, and even though they're small, are little tastes of that classic FromSoftware level design. Some of these dungeons are easy to find, some are hidden behind walls you'll need to leap over, and some of them can be found thanks to the guidance of statues you'll find in the world that will help indicate what direction to go. Many of these dungeons are slightly reminiscent of Chalice dungeons from Bloodborne in their scale, but unlike those, they're all handcrafted and well thought out. However, there are also larger dungeons you'll find that aren't legacy dungeons, so the size and scope widely varies. Meanwhile, the game's legacy dungeons are similar to major FromSoftware areas of the past. In a way, you can think of it like stumbling upon an area from Demon Souls. Instead of returning to a hub to access Boletaria or separately Latria, now you'll be able to travel across an open world that connects Boletaria to Latria, or perhaps more on the scale of finding Irithyll of the Boreal Valley from Dark Souls 3. The legacy dungeons themselves are large, interwoven, and intricately designed with plenty of verticality and uniqueness, and will give you that classic FromSoftware experience I'm sure you're craving if you're a fan of these games. In order to help traverse the world, you'll now have a spectral steed called Torrent, who you can summon at any point in time, as long as you're outside of dungeons and legacy dungeons, with a spectral steed Whistle. Riding horseback is its own unique experience in Elden Ring. All of your weapons have unique movesets for riding horseback, with some, like lances, meant for this type of combat. Your horse can also double jump and utilize spirit springs to launch up high in the air and access areas much higher than a double jump can. There are also bosses you'll find in the field designed to be fought via horseback as opposed to on foot. While playing the network test, I came across a tree sentinel boss early on. One time I tackled and defeated him on foot, while another I attempted the fight horseback. While it was certainly possible to do the fight on foot, the battle was far easier on horseback, and this was definitely meant to be the way to tackle this particular boss. You'll also encounter a dragon that was shown in the Elden Ring trailers, and once again, this boss is definitely easier to tackle on your steed. All of that said, as you can't bring your steed into dungeons, this in no way replaces traditional Souls combat, but rather is an additional experience on top of that classic FromSoftware style gameplay. While the lands between are entirely connected, at least as far as we're currently aware, there is a central hub similar to Firelink Shrine, Majula, or the Hunter's Dream, and you'll find plenty to do within the hub, which is completely separate from the open world of the game, again, as far as we're aware. If you're familiar with prior FromSoftware games, you'll have a good grasp of how combat works. It'll have both an HP and FP meter, with FP allowing you to perform magic and special weapon attacks. You'll also have a stamina meter, which is crucial to these games, as you'll need to wait for it to recharge before you can perform actions like attacking or dodging. You'll have 4 basic sets of moves per weapon and shield. With each weapon, you can use it one-handed with a set of light attacks or heavier attacks, or choose to dual-wield your weapon for a separate set of more powerful light and heavy attacks. You can equip your shields or weapons to any hand you like, meaning if you want, you can wield 2 weapons at once, and sometimes combine these attacks at the expense of more defense. Each weapon and shield come with the type of weapon art. Some of these weapon arts are locked per weapon, especially when it comes to unique weapons. However, you'll also find many equipable weapon arts as you play through the game, which you'll be able to equip to non-unique weapons. Similar to previous Soulsborne games, you'll also be able to parry enemy attacks, opening them up for a much more powerful riposte. Similarly, you can strafe around your enemies to try and find an opening to backstab them. New to Elden Ring are guard counters. By blocking an enemy attack, you can immediately counter with a strong guard counter that can break the stance of many stubborn opponents. However, it comes with the risk of being relatively slow, so perform these at your own risk. Also new to Elden Ring are 2 abilities carried over from Sekiro. You'll now be able to use stealth to sneak around enemies, as well as jump. These elements have worked their way into combat, as you can use stealth to sneak up to enemies without alerting them to quickly backstab them, or at the very least, take them out before they can call for reinforcements. Meanwhile, you can attack while jumping, with these attacks also being a good way to break enemies' guards. It also allows you to reach and attack potential weak points of certain opponents. Outside of melee combat, ranged combat has returned with various caster builds and spells you can utilize. To be honest, I didn't play around with these as much as the melee builds, so I don't know quite as much about it, but it seems to act just like prior games, with plenty of amazing spells you'll find throughout the game. Something brand new to Elden Ring are Spirit Ashes. You can equip these ashes in the same slot as your Estus Flasks and use them to summon spirits who will help attack enemies and bosses. In my experience, finding Spirit Ashes you could equip was like finding any other weapon or armor, with some hidden away and others available for purchase from merchants. The Spirit Ashes are meant to be an additional way players can tackle challenges and thereby make the game more accessible to a larger group of players. While one critique of the game has been that these Spirit Ashes make it too easy, especially after people had a chance to use them in the network test, according to Game Informer, who played the closed beta early, these summons have been severely nerfed and hardly do anything against major bosses. Like weapons, however, you'll be able to find a special Spirit Tuner who it seems like will be able to upgrade the power of your Spirit Ashes, meaning it's another thing that FromSoftware has tried to balance into the game with upgrades. Something interesting that was implemented in the closed beta was that for defeating certain bosses, in this case Margit from the trailer and network test, players now receive a talisman slot. Talismans act as your special attribute rings in Elden Ring. As of now, it's unclear how many of these slots you'll be able to unlock, but it's definitely interesting you currently had to defeat a boss in order to do so. Like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne, Elden Ring will feature an always online multiplayer. You'll be able to see bloodstains of other Tarnished who have perished and leave and rate messages to help other players, or try to get them to waste their time. You'll also be able to invade other players' worlds for PvP, meaning as a player who isn't partaking in that, you still run the risk of having your own world invaded by a hostile player. But you can also summon players to help you progress, and players can be summoned in to help with PvP. Covenants will also be returning, although details on those are currently scant. Miyazaki has stated that he wants the online multiplayer to be easier to access than ever before, and there are now summoning pools within Elden Ring in order to make it easier to find players looking to help or fight. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this. I tried my best to balance revealing important gameplay details while also not being too spoilery. This is part of a series of Elden Ring content we're making in preparation for the upcoming release. If you enjoyed this, I'd love it if you checked out my look back at one of my favorite FromSoftware games, King's Field, and I can't wait to cover more Elden Ring and go down this journey with all you fellow Tarnished.